Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I also rise to address the Education Legislation Amendment, Adult and Community Education and Other Matters Bill 2022, and in doing so acknowledge the contribution of the member for Footscray, who's just made a contribution to the bill, and also my colleague, the member for Croydon, who went through in some detail the bill and the provisions within it. Deputy Speaker, I want to address this bill in a couple of parts. Firstly, in relation to the amendments that are sought to be made in the adult education space, I think the Minister, in his second reading speech, summarised it best in the penultimate paragraph within the second reading speech of the Minister when he said, in summary, the amendments in this bill are mainly technical in nature and seek to make important improvements to a number of components of the government education and training system established under the Education Act. There's nothing like Acting Deputy Speaker going through 4 pages of text, 5 in fact, before getting to the punchline, and I think largely that's true. The purpose of this bill is to make those amendments to tidy things up and appropriately do so. The second part of this bill, of course, is in the child safety and wellbeing space, and I don't think there is anything more important than that. The member for Croydon and the Shadow Minister for Education, Mr Hodgett, has indicated that, in fact, the opposition on this occasion will be not opposing this bill. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to start at the beginning, funny enough, with the purpose of education. And look, my own experience in this space is through not only as a student, but I studied teaching at Deakin University, secondary teaching, started a double degree there. I worked in a secondary school, my alma mater, St Bede's College, as the youth minister there for a 12-month period, and enjoyed that work while I was also studying to be a teacher. And then I had the great privilege of working in Catholic education as well, at Catholic Education Melbourne, during some fairly feisty debates with the then federal government over federal government Gonski funding. The federal member for Maribyrnong, a new minister in the new federal government, was the then education minister, and I remember some discussions about education funding that were had with him at that time. I'm now at a stage of life where my 4-year-old daughter is attending school next year, and so my perspective on the policy area of education has become very personal and is becoming increasingly so as I age and the years go on. Deputy Speaker, I do want to say that, in my view, the purpose of education is pretty simple. In my view, the purpose of education is to prepare young people for a life after they leave school. It's very easy to get caught up in the day-to-days of school life and get caught up in the day-to-day outcomes of school life. But I think what we should be all aiming to do is to prepare our young people to tackle the challenges of life beyond the institutions of schools. That is the best gift that we can give them, and as legislators it's incumbent upon us to do everything we can to provide them with that framework that prepares them to contribute to life beyond school. Like the member for Caulfield, I'd like to make acknowledgement or call out just a number of local institutions within the Sandringham district who do have an interest and a concern in the adult education space. The BGK LEN, of course, that the member for Caulfield referred to, that's the Bayside, Glen Ira, Kingston Local Learning and Education Network, recently had a careers expo at the Beaumaris Secondary College, which they invited me to open, and sadly it was a parliamentary sitting day. I wasn't able to attend that, but I understand that they do some outstanding work in connecting young people with potential future career opportunities. Once again, preparing young people for a life outside of the institutions of a school, and what marvellous work they do. I was thrilled that the member for Caulfield referred to just one of their programs that they're undertaking, a program called the $20 Boss and BGK LEN program, making enterprise and entrepreneurial education special, where some of those students just start with $20 and they do whatever they can to try and make that, well, more than $20 through enterprise and entrepreneurship. What a wonderful thing to encourage young people to do. I acknowledge, Deputy Speaker, the community houses in my constituency, and I acknowledge the Minister responsible for those community houses, Minister Carbines, is at the table now. I thank him for his support of those community houses in a recent decision made just a day or so before the handing down of the Victorian budget, in fact, to continue the funding for some of the programs at those community houses. And I've spoken to the Minister directly about that. Those community houses in Hampton, in Hyatt, at the Sandy Beach Centre as well, they provide educational programs for some members of our community who would otherwise not feel that connectedness to a community. They provide that environment which is right for them, so that those people, whether they be people who feel the disconnection from their community, they might be older people, do feel connected to their community. They provide that space, they provide that safety, and they provide those programs for adult learning. And I'm just so grateful for the work that they do for our community, especially after the last couple of years that we've been through. Deputy Speaker, at the Sandy Beach Centre, I acknowledge the recent passing of one of its founders, Bruce Morey. Bruce Morey was one of the founders of the Sandy Beach Centre and died only in the last month or so. He started an institution within the Sandringham district, within the Sandringham community, which arguably, on one scale, is absolutely unrivalled. Bruce Morey has passed from this life, but his legacy remains at the Sandy Beach Centre. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to make his memorial service on that Saturday just a couple of months ago, but I think that the greatest tribute that I can pay Bruce is by continuing to support the Sandy Beach Centre, as I do and have great pleasure in doing. And of course there's the U3A in Bayside as well, another wonderful institution where there are those gifted people amongst our community who contribute and give back to our community without expecting anything in return. These people who have been professionals in their life, in engineering, in languages, in arts, in culture, in history, in sports and exercise science and other areas, who take up these classes at U3A and through their volunteer work give other older people an opportunity within our community to learn and to continue learning. And this is my point, Deputy Speaker. We are all on a journey of lifelong learning, no matter who we are, no matter what stage of life we're at. And that must be acknowledged, and I'm just so grateful to those institutions within my own electoral district whose very purpose is to enable people within my community to continue their path of lifelong learning, because it's not just about what they learn, but it's about the community connections that they make, and it's about bringing people together in our community so that our community can thrive even more. It would be remiss of me, Deputy Speaker, not to make just some brief final remarks about some of the broader educational needs within my own electorate. Beaumaris Primary School and Beaumaris North Primary School are in desperate need of new school halls. I've made that request of the government, I've made that request of the Treasurer and of the Education Minister. I will continue to fight for new school halls at both Beaumaris Primary and Beaumaris North Primary. Mentone Girls Secondary College, the only all-girls secondary college, state secondary college in the southern region of Melbourne, hasn't had a brass razoo of fair income major infrastructure dough in about 3 decades. and they desperately need their master plan finalised and for their rebuilding of their school to commence. And of course, Sandringham Secondary College, a wonderful education over 2 campuses, a wonderful educational institution over 2 campuses within the electoral district of Sandringham, which has received, through my advocacy and the advocacy of others, the first $10 million for stage 1 of their redevelopment. $10 billion doesn't build a new school. They need their second $10 million committed. I'll continue to fight to deliver that outcome.